Happening now, we'd like to welcome our viewers from across North America and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room, episode 380 for August the 19th, 2026. My name is Wes Fryer. I am a middle school teacher in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I am joined as always by the EdTech guru of the Northern Hemisphere. I'm just promoting you tonight, Jason Neiffer. At least north of the Mason-Dixon line, there's no one else you want to ask about AI than Jason.
And clearly the Mason-Dixon line is really an EdTech border, right? That's really where it breaks down in the United States.
I think it may still be alive and well here. I'm just saying. Hey, it's good to see you, sir. You're kind of stabilized with your background. So am I looking at your aspirational cabin situation here? Is that...
Yeah, although it does give really heavy Airbnb vibes, as it turns out. So that looks like clearly a place that would rent out an Airbnb. But
it's a nice library. It's a nice library in the back. So I'll say that.
Yeah, I would also say too that my wife and I have so many books in our home, the vast majority of which are unshelved, that are just in piles across. In fact, I'm not going to show it off because my office is in the middle of a disaster transition. But I literally have, I'm going to guess it's 10 feet. Ooh. Is that right? Oh yeah, 10 feet of books lining the shelves where everything else is stored at in my office. But it's one of the many things that I will leave to my nieces when I am no longer of this earth. Yeah. Where do we get this tangent? Good evening, Dr. Fryer. Joining you from Missoula, Montana tonight, where the weather actually has been quite beautiful. It rained most of the weekend, which means the smoke dissipated a little bit. And so it's been a real joy. And I'm going to be in Washington this weekend where the high is going to be 67. So really excited about that. I really like the transition to fall. So I'm excited that fall is coming soon.
Hey, we are ready for it here. And it has been super, super hot. Of course, I think it was 108 without the heat index in Oklahoma City yesterday, where our daughter is. 108. That's like Peggy George Phoenix hot. Yeah. And we've just been in the low 90s, but we are looking forward to the fall weather too. So eventually it will come, but not yet here in the Piedmont of North Carolina. But I'm glad to hear that. Is the smoke gone or are you still smoky?
The smoke is largely gone. I know that, and I think the rain helped a lot, but I think we'll still get some for the next couple of weeks. And then fingers crossed that we don't have any new fires in the end of the season.
All right. I think that you and I both logged on to the notes a mere 10 minutes maybe before showtime or something. I did not use any, I guess I did. I didn't use AI tools to gather links tonight. I used Claude to summarize one. But yeah, what are we going to do here tonight as I gaze at this Google document?
Wes and I spent 10 minutes scanning the headlines from across the United States and around the world. And we're going to talk about the impact on the classroom tonight. And obviously there's going to be some AI news. And there was some kind of breaking news today that we can talk about for sure. But I also see that we've got a screen time article, some Google articles, and we'll end tonight with our Geeks of the Week. And Dr. Fryer, I am thrilled to hear about whatever it is you're going to report about Meshtastic. So I feel like that maybe in the future, this could be you and me nerding out at ISTE, like encouraging all the nerds to get up on the Meshtastic network.
I'll tell you, today I'm teaching one of my classes, my broadcast media class in our library, and I'm sharing that room with three other colleagues. And one of them very whimsically and good-naturedly asked us all to do 20 fun facts. And I did reveal that one of my fun facts is one of my hobbies is a prepper, and I'm building a resilient smart home that functions without internet connectivity. So yes, thanks to your comment and actually Geek of the Week last week, I could pontificate about that for a while. So we can leave a little more time if we wanted to for Geeks of the Week. We are a little less link heavy tonight. I do want to point out we have a new category under AI, which is called bad calls. So I'm looking forward to that one.
And now that you say it out loud, what a delightful name that we came up with there. So.
Yes, and our friend and colleague in Idaho is here as well full, I know, of witty comments in our chat. So we do have a few live viewers. I did send my dad the link as well. So you never know who's going to be here. Friends from Idaho, friends from Manhattan, Kansas, and friends from Phoenix. Actually, and I guess I could digress. I don't know if I can get to it quick. I guess I got to log in. But the number of downloads on Substack is usually over 500 for our
Wow.
episodes now. So that's cool. That's exciting.
Yeah, that's really great.
So we're glad you're here live if you're here with us. If I could, Jason, I would like to put in a request that we start with the EdTechlash in full swing. Would you mind sharing about
Not
this one?
at all. And there's been a lot of articles on this the last 6 months, but this one, because it comes from Education Next, which is published by the Harvard School of Education, I think is interesting. But Frederick Hess publishes, and I think it was about a week or so ago, that there is a conversation back and forth between Mr. Hess and Jal Mehta about the kind of the the education reform that's now taking on an anti-tech piece to it. And I think the way they frame it is really interesting, that they then cite a Center for Reinventing Public Education article that is asking people to focus on what makes us distinctly human. And it's really interesting because obviously we're talking with the MTDA board about screen time. We're talking to school leaders across the state about screen time. And it's not quite an existential threat. I think that even a significant limit legally would give some certain exceptions for a distance learning program that's a vital resource for a student, particularly in rural state like Montana. But I think it goes a little farther than that I do think that we are owed some community conversations on this stuff. And I don't think that tech is the problem. It's obviously the core of the problem, or I guess the noun of the problem. But the bottom line is that these, in my mind, are still all instructional decisions. And bad pedagogy is bad pedagogy, or I should maybe not even say bad. Ineffective pedagogy is ineffective pedagogy, no matter if it involves a screen or not. And when I hear about some of the specific cited complaints that I've heard from administrators, directly from parents, as I've talked to friends that have school age kiddos, and as it turns out, I think that those are very legitimate complaints, right? And for me, it's not good enough to say that teachers are just doing it badly, so we need to go back to pen and paper. I still think there's actually a lot of value in pen and paper and doing things thoughtfully without screens. But it goes back to the fact that I do think screens are a part of our kids' lives, whether we like them or not. But more importantly, like, we do have an obligation to help prepare students for that world. And I think that's where we've fallen short, is providing teachers with good instructional technology instruction. And I'm not going to say that I guarantee do it right either. I do a lot more professional development than I did, say, 5 years ago, in part because of Montana Digital Academy working with AI. But I do think that some of the framing that has really dominated tech in the last 20 years just isn't the way to go. The 10 free tools to do X, or I do think pedagogy discussions are required. And I don't want to claim that I saw this coming. I think that Wes and I have been talking about it for 10 years.
You can claim that. It's okay. You did.
Yeah. And it's funny because I did speak on screen time and screen value concepts to school administrators in Montana at the end of July. And one of the things that I found was two presentations that I gave, old slides from pre-2020 presentations that I gave that were near this topic. One of them was digital distraction, which is a topic that I've spoken on a lot, actually. And my conclusion was that it wasn't that we get rid of tech. The conclusion is that teachers need to assert themselves instructionally with technology in the classroom. And then the second one was an administrator's guide to effective educational technology. And what I said was that you need to look for the learning, right? You need to ask what is happening in this concept. And if it is, there is lots of good pedagogy reasons to have relatively undirected instruction, right? But you still have to have a plan, and you still have to have a goal, and you still need to be able to say, what is the screen doing that it is of a benefit to the learning concept, right? And I think that there are cases where that just is not happening. And I've thought that for a long time now, going back to the late 90s when I started teaching. Your thoughts, sir?
First of all, have you given serious thought to writing a book about technology leadership for administrators, or something along those lines? specifically for administrators. I think you should.
It's
It,
interesting. Yeah. And
it,
honestly, I don't know a lot of great books in that particular space. There's some good books, great books, but not
yeah.
like I've read a lot of them that are, I think, nibbling around the issue.
One of the tricks, of course, I think would be to write a book that's transcendent and not too tooly and too focused on on current technologies. I say this as someone who has done this before with some books, but anyway, I think that would be a great contribution. Just some of my experiences in the last 10 to 15 years with administrators have really been eye-opening to me, just in terms of, I would assume administrators would understand the importance of professional development, the understanding of helping create a culture of learning. And it's so important to include technology in that. So I think I might have started this maybe last week, but I'm going to make an analogy or comparison to what we're seeing right now around data centers
Yeah.
and what we're seeing around screens. I'll wax philosophical for a moment because one of my good buddies on the debate team in college loved Alvin Toffler and the Third Wave, and we would do impromptu speeches and extempos, but especially impromptus. He would almost always bring in the Third Wave. It was a big joke, and we would laugh about it. But
Great.
we
Yeah.
all learned
Tell me
about.
you were a short prep speaker in the 90s without telling me you're a short prep speaker in the 90s, right?
Oh
Like,
yeah,
yeah,
oh yeah.
mid 80s to mid 90s, lots of Toffler being tossed around in speech tournaments.
Yes.
So,
In fact, I should probably go back and read
yeah,
Toffler now
I
because
agree.
like Neil Postman is so prescient and relevant today with technopoly and amusing ourselves to death and teaching is a subversive activity. I just love his books and his ideas. But the point about making this comparison is Toffler talked about how difficult the transition to the third wave or the information economy would be. First wave being the hunter-gatherer to agriculture, the agricultural revolution. Second wave, industrial revolution. Third wave, we're very much in the throes of it. And he predicted wars. He predicted all kinds of conflict. But also, as I remember, and I read that 30 years ago, it's just really hard to process fast change, and we are having a lot of fast change that is highly disruptive and that's upsetting, and that it's just difficult to deal with for a lot of reasons. And one of them is there's a lot of invisible changes and things that aren't tangible. And so the argument I'm going to make is that when it comes to data centers right now, data centers are a physical thing that are being put into communities, that have been put into communities, that folks are debating about putting into communities. They can make a lot of noise. They can use a lot of electricity that can raise residential electricity rates if those externalities are not paid for by the companies. They can consume a lot of water. There are some real big reasons. And they don't really provide a lot of jobs. You don't need a ton of people that are running these things. And it's part of this whole AI boom. But there's all these things that people are upset about and concerned about. Tech centers are a specific thing that people can be angry about. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be. I do think we need to be concerned. And I do think we should be strong participants in our democracy. And I don't think that we should, for instance, just throw these data centers in the poorest areas of our community where some of the folks that have the possibly quietest voice or the least heard voices in local governance are going to just be the ones who have to deal with this and put up with it. Where's the railroad and the land by the railroad or whatever? So when it comes to screens, we have a lot of anger and frustration that families feel and that parents feel. There are so many different things going on in schools. Our kids, and at least I'm talking in my students here in Charlotte and North Carolina and the ones I know, they're very overprogrammed. They're very overscheduled. Sports have a huge impact, much, much greater today than ever before in our society. Parents are very busy. Some of them work more than one job. There's inflation. There's a lot of different things going on. And we recently had COVID and we lived through emergency remote learning, which was very traumatic for a lot of people. And it resulted in some learning loss for students. And anyway, I don't know if I can find an article and somebody else is making this case, but I think that the techlash, or as we've called it, the tech correction, there's a lot of reasons for it, but the screens in the hands of students and seeing students distracted, and again, Jonathan Haidt, the anxious generation, another podcast. In fact, it's the one I mentioned last week from the Sean Ryan show with the Mandiant founder talking about AI cyber war. talked about that in the graphs. He literally said, you don't have to read anything in the book, just look at the graphs and you can see. And it is absolutely a correlation that the smartphone comes out in the late 2000s, iPhone in 2007, and you have a lot of different graphs of poor, declining self-perceptions for students. I'm not going to quote all of these well, but wellness among students, especially teenage girls, really goes down. We have suicide rates up, distractibility, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of things going on. And I think that both the screens in students' hands and the tech centers in our communities are things that we can get upset about. And as we've talked about before on the show, neither of us are real advocates for binary thinking, tech good, tech bad, AI good, AI bad. It's like reading good, reading bad, driving good, driving bad. Yes, it's both good and bad, but it would be very unfortunate if we threw out all the books because some books take us down a road that's not healthy for us. And I think the same thing is absolutely true of screens. And I'm 100% with you, Jason, on the pedagogy side. So I'll keep on saying this. Those of us that are advocates for the appropriate and constructive uses of educational technologies need to be the advocates for that good and strong pedagogy. I think we need students to create to learn. I think as teachers, we need to we need to create lessons in which we design, create, and share. We invite students to engage with content and material, to be able to create some meaningful representation of their understanding and communicate that, possibly with multimedia. And then we also need to be reflecting back. We need to show and share, and we need to have opportunities to get feedback on our work. And this is essential to my teaching in year 32 of being an educator. And I think that we need to invest in education. When we left Oklahoma, folks were just they did away with the requirement to be a college graduate to be certified to teach in the state of Oklahoma. In Oklahoma today, you only need a high school diploma. This is a real big step back. And teacher education has been under siege for years and years. So this is a call for us to invest in not only professional development, but teacher education, and for us to also speak to the power and the positive potential for screens to open up doors. And I know you're doing it all the time, Jason. I've seen some of the spotlight articles and the little videos that you all have done. And that's probably a clear case in a small Montana community where you don't have a big high school that can offer this incredible menu and breadth of courses. It's a special gift and a very important gift to have a resource like the Montana Digital Academy and to be able to use screens. And I think that we need to be sharing those stories more. And I'm glad that you all are, and I hope more folks will share those same kind of stories.
Yep, absolutely. And the article does mention that one of the proxies for this right now is AI itself. And we've got some other articles that we're going to talk about tonight related to AI. But the bottom line for me is that I'm also a centrist about AI. It's not good, it's not bad. I can see good things, I can see bad things. But the bottom line is that how you use it and how you interpret it how you use it in an educational context matters actually quite a bit and has to be the beginning and middle and the end of that conversation.
Indeed. All right. Hey, we talked for 20 minutes on one article. That's pretty good. Or not very good if we're trying to cover the spread. So
Yeah.
What would you like next, sir?
Why don't you go ahead and let's do these Google articles? They look pretty interesting.
Yeah, sometimes you just look inside Google and see, oh my gosh, how long has that been there? And I happen to notice some video options. So we'll go to the 2005 article first because this isn't new. These are both from the Google Workspace blog. And I did, by the way, I asked Claude for help finding these, but I asked specifically for articles about this. September 24th, 2025, create videos from your existing Google Slides presentation. Earlier this year, we announced the first iteration of the ability to turn Google Slides content into engaging videos using Google Vids, which I will admit to you, I have not played with extensively. But you take your existing content, your existing slideshow, and then you turn it into a video. So that was literally 11 months ago. It was a year ago that Google announced this. On July 29th of 2026, on the same Google Workspace blog, the post is titled July Workspace Drops, Create Engaging Presentations, Draft Docs Faster, and Work on the Go. They are, again, highlighting how you can take an existing presentation. They've got enhancements now to both Google Slides and Google Vids to create videos. I have not played a lot with this, but there's a deck generation feature in Google Slides. They say you can bypass hours of manual work and generate a complete presentation in a fraction of the time. What I have done with Google Tools several times now is used what was NotebookLM, and I don't know if we've mentioned on the show, it's now Gemini Notebook, and used my library of content and then told NotebookLM to create a presentation. I had a chance to attend a wonderful workshop in Nashville last April by Lead for Change. And it was really about wellness and identity and knowing yourself and your purpose and your why. It was actually, and it's about leadership. We are all better able to lead when we know ourselves and we know our goals and we are in a place where those things align. And so anyway, I did a little presentation in May for our school's in-house professional development, and that was probably the first time I had done a full presentation using those tools. I had to tweak stuff and change stuff, but I think these are important tools to explore. And of course, I teach this middle school class called Computer Applications, where Google tools and what's available in the Google universe is really a centerpiece of what we do in our class. The article says with Vids AI avatars, you can automatically storyboard slides or generate a script to turn your avatar into a digital presenter. If you need to reach a wider audience, you can re-script your avatar at any time. And you can generate AI voiceovers in 8 languages, including Japanese, Korean, Spanish, and French. Oh my gosh. I don't know. Have I ever told you what the first request I received as a school technology director was?
No.
Technology was. It was from the World Language Department, and they asked me to block Google Translate. It was fast. I was on the job in day one, and I had language teachers in my office saying, please block this now. And I was like, I can, but kids do have their smartphones, and I don't think we ended up blocking it. So have you played with these tools, Jason? And what do you think of, because I'm betting for in all the presentations and things you've done, I saw you nodding when I mentioned NotebookLM. What have your experiences been with some of these AI presentation enhancement tools?
Yeah, I am an incredible slide snob, and so I don't like giving up control, which is probably the weird way to put that. But what I particularly like about the stuff that Notebook generates is that when you generate slides, especially since you can now one-off prompt individual slides, right? If it doesn't look right, and or as I was working with teachers in my old city, Montana, yesterday on the eastern side of our state, and I believe she was an English teacher, and there were several misspellings in a slide. That still happens. It's better, way better than it was even 6 months ago, but still, it still happens, right? But since you can do some of that kind of reprompting or kind of focus prompting to modify pieces, it actually works quite well. And what I've also learned too is that if you create some kind of design language, and at some point, it's a demo we'd probably want to start with because it takes a little while. I have this really great demo I do about distracting the design DNA out of your school mascot logo and then using that to generate classroom images or wrestling meet posters or school dance announcements or even a PowerPoint theme, Google Slides theme to use on. But that's a fun one that is surprisingly effective. But you can give that design language to NotebookLM by just sharing a document that says design language in it and then ask NotebookLM to, I'm sorry, Notebook. The LM is going to stick with me for a while. Yeah, Notebook to then take in mind the design language when it makes it. So yeah, it's really cool. And also too, that the other way I like to think of those slides is that they are like little mini infographics, right? And so if you want to get 4 or 5 options that you may choose to drop into something just to show during a discussion or a project or something to put on paper or something to put on a small screen, those are all, I think, great options. But yeah, I have not played around very much with really any of the other than the small generation tools. Google Vids has been around for a while, and every time I go back to it, it's got 17 more features. So very interesting for sure.
I wish I had an opportunity to attend some kind of one day sort of Google boot camp when I was in Oklahoma for 16 years. It was actually folks in Kansas, they may still be active, that had a Google educator group and would get together face to face several times a year and had some real serious Google using teachers that could just share all kinds of stuff. And a lot of that was updates. And anyway, I miss that. I wish that was still available. I will say that infographics and being able to create like AI enhanced versions of sketch notes is pretty stunning and amazing in Gemini. I don't hear them talking about Nano Banana as much. So anyway, whatever engine is inside Gemini Flash, which is the latest model that we're using, it can do a pretty exceptional job of either taking a sketch note you've done or even just taking notes that you've taken and then tell it in your design language, use the sketchnoting style of Mike Rohde and Rachel Smith or other known sketchnoters and create infographics. And I'm definitely going to be doing that with my students this year. I've dabbled with that a little bit, and I don't think it replaces the value of sketchnoting and taking notes. And this is important research to talk about. I know you cite this often, that when you have a pencil in your hand and you're writing something down on paper, we have research that shows that helps ideas, at least short term, stick in the brain. But visually representing ideas and then also retelling it. In my fantasy world, I would be spending more time focusing on transmediation, the taking of a media message in one format and then converting it into another format and communicating it.
And I'll add another thing to that too. This is also something that we should be sharing with kids. That the bottom line is that writing doesn't eliminate technology out of the equation. It's just another medium mode, right? And I'll give you a really good example of this. I have more than my share of meetings nowadays, and especially when I'm out of town and I've spent money to get there, that I really do want to, I might as well just stay at home if I'm going to stay behind my laptop. But I was at a meeting a couple months ago where expectation, laptops down. Great. I'm glad we stayed at that, right? And I had my notebook, which I carry with me, a notebook with me everywhere, and a nice pen. So I like to write in the notebook. But I get a lot of things that brew in my head when I'm listening to something else. And if I don't write it down, I lose it, right? And so that day, I probably filled out 5-8 pages of ideas and notes, and all I did was to have those, or did to work with those, is I took a picture of the page and I shared it with ChatGPT, and I said, transcribe this. And of course, mostly it just mocked my handwriting, and then I had a first draft for something, right? And I can tell you 3 of those things turned into big projects later, right? And not everything I wrote down was worthwhile, but I think that the research clearly shows that, but it's also my personal experience, right? And I think, and we've talked about sketchnoting in the past too. My partner in crime, Mike Agustinelli, and I have taught a couple of workshops on sketchnoting, which we used to advertise as do it with tech or with paper, right? Like there's good writing platforms now on tech, or just do it on paper. But the research behind the idea of choosing icons to represent words, it really does an interesting thing with memory, right? And that's some of the kind of little tricks you can play on your brain. And knowing something is better than looking up something 100% of the time. And it's a way to help jog your memory. It's a way to help put things deeply in your brain. And I think now more than ever, it's important for us to talk to students about that in light of the power that AI is likely sticking its nose into.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes me think of a possible research. I tell my kids sketchnoting is a personal thing. It's selfish. You're doing it for yourself. You're not doing it so that I can
Yeah.
look at the page and say what you were thinking and what you heard. It's so that you can look at this again and remember, oh, yes, this is what the speaker said, and this is the point that they were making. And we got to think about how we measure learning, and measuring it like 24 hours later, or 48 hours later is quite different than 3 months later, 6 months later. And so it would be interesting to, for instance, present a lesson to students and then have some sketch note and some not, and then have that first group, at the end of the semester, for
Yeah.
instance, try to retell what it is they remember about that, and then the others be able to look at their sketch note and see how they can retell it. Because I've definitely
Yeah, and
experienced.
one story that I certainly have mentioned, but I haven't, it's worth saying. I used to have a running joke in my social studies classes. It was in my syllabus. There was a sign in my classroom. It was an extra credit question on almost every quiz or test I gave. And the question was, who was the president of Russia? Who was Vladimir Putin when I was teaching, and still is for that matter. For a little while, he was the prime minister of Russia. So I changed the question. But this is information my students receive directly and indirectly over and over again. Some students remembered it, some students didn't. But I would ask that as an extra credit quiz question in March or April when they've exposed that information hundreds of times. And it is funny because the kids usually would just scream when they couldn't remember the president of Russia's name,
Yeah.
right? And also it was out of context, right? Just who's the president of Russia? But it taught me a little thing about memory too, right? That's something that even if you're exposed to information, remembering it is quite a different story.
And this also speaks to brain research and why professional development is so important, because if we think we have done our job, if the students are able to recite all the states and capitals perfectly, try that in 6 months. But then also think about how the brain remembers the gist, how we tend to remember stories,
Yep.
and what is important. And just like doing multiplication facts, and oh, they can start a big argument with math folks if we want to argue about that. But times tables and multiplication facts are not the ultimate sign of mathematical competency and fluency in elementary school or moving forward. It is an important building block. And we helped our kids learn their multiplication facts, but learning how to analyze, learning how to think critically, learning how to use different algorithms, think abstractly. There's a lot of things that mathematics tries to teach thinking. That's what it tries to teach.
Yeah.
And that is actually what I think one of the main purposes of school and education. We are also babysitters. We're also folks that help kids socially develop. We do all kinds of things in school as teachers and as institutions, but learning to think. And that's one of the fundamental sort of misunderstandings that many people have about curriculum and learning, is that it's the banking model that Paulo Freire talks about. That I make a deposit in your brain, I ask for it in return, you regurgitate it as the learner. We do a lot of that transactional teaching and learning, quote unquote. Thinking is a complex thing. And I continue to focus on reading and writing because these are the ways that we've taught thinking for years and years. And so hopefully we can find ways that AI is going to supplement that. And we're going to be able to find ways for students to have authentic assessment and to really get at what they do understand, not just 24 hours later, but beyond that.
Yeah.
And that we can deepen not only their understanding of a topic and their knowledge of facts and details, but also their ability to analyze, their ability to respond to a argument. We go back to speech and debate, being able to
Yeah.
handle cross-examination and sound reasonable and support your claims with evidence. This is what we do in cross-examination debate. And these are activities that we can and should do in the classroom. So yes, here we go, folks. We're on the speech and debate rant again.
And I'll just mention one more time that we've mentioned his name a couple of times, but Stephan Bouchard, who is doing a lot of great work in AI and education right now, who has a lifelong history of being a really amazing debate coach and publisher of debate materials and high school and college and world debate. He's been part of bringing debate around the world, but he is convinced that if we really want to prepare kids for an AI dominated future, then the answer is to make kids do debate. And I think that there's an incredible amount of logic to that, because the bottom line is that it teaches critical thinking in a way that it's really hard to get to the depth of it inside of a classroom.
And I just dropped his Substack into the chat. It's titled Education Disrupted: Teaching and Learning in an AI World, with over 5,000 subscribers. So check it out. I feel like we should do some quick hits of some articles. Do we want to do these bad calls kind of quickly?
Yeah, because they're terrible and
Yeah.
are worthy of us.
Yeah. All right.
So
I'll start
we'll
with
start. Oh, go ahead.
No, you do. You go.
Okay.
Do the AI chatbot.
Gizmodo reported yesterday, August 18th, that a school district in Kentucky sent home an agenda that included spelling errors clearly made by AI, including a USA map that misspelled things like Louisiana. And instead of calling it Kentucky, it spelled it Ventucky. And then it called Saturn Satur. And then it goes on to mock the school district. And this is, and I get it, right? That there are a lot of pressures on schools, but this is a no-brainer because there are free maps that have no copyrights on them available across the internet of the United States, right?
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that we're talking about a lot at MTDA, is that we shouldn't be AI generating images that we have easy access to. Right? That just doesn't make any sense in context of curriculum development. And I get the temptation. And I think also we want to use these powerful tool sets to help us with our jobs. But the bottom line is that I don't think this is helping along the debate of where this stuff fits. And I don't think it's a bad model for kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And these kinds of articles are definitely going to be making news. And I think there's one risk is that they can reinforce a perception that many adults, including teachers, have had about AI, and that is that AI chatbots hallucinate all the time. They just make stuff up, and therefore they're trash and they're not useful for anything. And I do think that the hallucination issue is a very persistent one. And I've heard folks like Sundar Pichai, I think, and others talk about how Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google, hallucinations are an essential thing that, I don't mean essential like they are intended to be a part of it, but it's the way that generative artificial intelligence works. Anyway, we're going to do these these bad choices because they are important things to avoid, but hopefully this isn't going to fully shape your perceptions of AI. My next one is from The Guardian on August 18th. The headline is Report Supporting Australia's Teen Social Media Ban Appears to Contain AI Hallucinations, Senate Hears. And initially, the folks who published this report denied that they used AI at all. Then they just denied that the citation errors were due to AI hallucinations. But like we've heard about in some legal cases that have been well publicized, where lawyers presented, quote, evidence to the judge and cited cases that had never happened before because the
Yep.
AI had hallucinated them, the same kind of thing happened, which it's just sad. So we got to check our sources. And by the way, this is a reason I think that every research paper written today, this is going to be a broad statement, every research paper written today should have working hyperlinks. I am shocked that it is prevalent today still. And I did my dissertation in 2012. I have hyperlinks in my dissertation, but that was not required. I think it should be required at all levels where we're doing web research because it's part of just what we do as academics. And this is a really important part of checking our sources. So anyway, that was unfortunate. And then this one is just weird. I guess this is probably clickbait, so maybe I shouldn't even share this, but this is from Futurism. You can tell by the headline, right? Dude asks AI agent to book gym spot, accidentally launches autonomous cyber attack.
Yeah, this is a fascinating story. Please tell.
Yeah. Imagine what a real hacker could do. So, an Australian man asked his personal AI agent to book him a spot at a local gym. Little did he know this would snowball into a full-blown cyber attack. So he was using OpenClaw, which if you've listened to our show, go back a few episodes, Jason has in a sandbox separated from all the rest of his stuff, played with OpenClaw, which is this agentic AI tool. And what is it called? There's a phrase for this is like the paperclip challenge or something where you tell the AI to make paperclips and it ends up recognizing that humanity is an obstacle to its production of paperclips and it becomes very malevolent. So basically that kind of thing supposedly happens here where the AI went ahead and hacked the system. It identified the wait list. This guy was on the wait list, so it was able to go in and delete people that were earlier on the wait list to move him up. And then he realized this and said, oh my gosh, can you undo it? And the AI said, bad news, I can't add them back. Okay, and it does. Paperclip Maximizer. Nick Bostrom was a philosopher that came up with the Paperclip Maximizer. In this scenario, hypothetically, someone asks AI to find a way to manufacture as many paperclips as possible. The AI, lacking proper guardrails, realizes humans are obstacles to the goal and tries to use the entire planet and everything on it, humans included, to churn out more paperclips. So, yeah, this is pretty fascinating, and you can subtitle this OpenClaw Gone Bad. Have you had any more personal experiences, Jason, with OpenClaw? Has it hacked your local gym on your behalf?
It has not, but I will say that, and I think I might have mentioned this earlier this year, but when I was overseas during the month of May, one of the things I intended to do was play more with agents as a strategy, my free time traveling, and I lost access because the power went out in my house 1 hour after the plane took off from LA to Australia, and so I thought I'd lost everything. Not everything. I just lost my access to the agents, right? So I'd come back home and turn it back on again. The only thing that got messed up was my connection inside my network. Everything else was continuing to function. And one of the things that I had to do was downloading sources from, this was legislative hearings from the Montana legislature site, which I would do not automated, especially during the session if I missed something live. And we couldn't figure out how to get it to download. And so it had already had a job set up to download those. And so after 4 or 5 times of it not working, it just hard pressed until it figured out a way to get access to it. And when there's nothing hacky in it, it just needed to do a certain web call to be able to download the source of the video, right? In the same way that a Chrome extension might give you the opportunity to download a source video. And I thought about that a lot when I read the story because that was relatively innocuous, right? It's not something that is problematic, but man, that's a lot of power that it doesn't take. These agentic platforms you can install in a lot of locations really easily, and if you're not keeping an eye on them or not using good digital hygiene, that it could be extremely problematic.
So I don't have it set up yet, but I am pretty sure that the next webinar for the Media Education Lab I'll facilitate is going to be along the lines of AI, cyber war, and open source. Because when you look at what these agentic tools are able to do, and then you pair that with the Sean Ryan show, talking with the Mandiant founder for 3.5 hours, it's a super long show, but what he says, and nobody has a monopoly. No, nobody can see the whole future, right? Nobody knows exactly everything that's happening, but we do know some things that are happening right now. And these tools like OpenClaw and these, Claude Cowork and agentic AI have phenomenal power and potential to not only follow your specific instructions, but to also creatively iterate upon the goals that you give to them. And so we are living today in an incredibly hostile security environment for things online. I have been experiencing this with the websites that I have a server for, including EdTech and others. And I'm really debating how can I reduce my own attack surface in terms of the WordPress instances. There's something called a supply chain attack, which is when a hacker, a bad actor, will focus on a dependency, it's like a subroutine or function that's part of a larger package, but basically they'll be able to inject some malware into the system, and then they can get control and steal stuff and do bad stuff. I feel like I'm glimpsing this. Some people are optimistic in the long term. Eventually, this is going to give everybody better defenses against cyber attack, but right now we are not in that place. And so all like small time web folks like yours truly are really ill equipped. I'm not a full-time security guy. I can't I'm paying some different companies to do some security stuff. So anyway, it's just, yeah, this is a laugh. Ha, look what happened when this guy tried to book a spot on his gym. But what it shows is incredible power for just even simple commands. And when you think about bad actors who intentionally want to harm groups and individuals or countries, they want to take down water purification systems, electrical grids, ATMs. It's just, we're really in a place where I think we all need to think about resiliency and think about how would we function if we lose connectivity? How would your organization, this is the EdTech Situation Room, how is your school going to function if the internet is interrupted for a while? We can all
Yeah.
think back to 2 or 3 years ago when Cloud Strike happened, and one of my friends was leading an international tour, and I think he was in Canada and in the airport, and he had 30 people, and all their flights were canceled. And anyway, it was a crisis, right? And it was resolved within 24 to 48 hours. But that resolution isn't necessarily going to always happen that quickly. So anyway, those are the places where my brain goes as we are learning and talking and processing about agentic AI, OpenClaw. What can these tools do? What are they doing now? And I can tell you for sure that a number of bad actors are using them to unleash an unprecedented number of attacks against all kinds of websites, and even open source itself is really under threat
Yeah.
because of AI.
And I'll mention one other thing that it gives people a sense of the power of this stuff. I've seen so many articles in the last 4 weeks about people that have done things like They had a 20-year-old weirdo USB printer that only had a Windows driver that hasn't been updated in the last 13 years. And they use Claude Code to mostly autonomously write a Mac driver to use that printer, right? And and I say that not because look how great AI is, although that's pretty cool. The bottom line is it just gives you a sense of the power of things, right? If you can hammer through the creation of a driver for a printer that was never even supposed to be on that platform, that's pretty powerful.
My carbon monoxide Google Nest has expired. It expired in April. And to Google's credit, they're not going to update it anymore. So it's dead. It doesn't work anymore. It had alarms, and I just had to disable it. It's the first Internet of Things thing I've had do that. But I've wondered if there were open source projects about re-architecting the firmware. It's a speaker. I wonder if I could turn it into a off-grid smart speaker and have Claude Code, write me
Yeah,
firmware that would re-engineer that.
we're maybe bad for each other in this way, but I did look this up last week because I have two Generation 1 Alexa speakers that I'm sorry for saying Madam's A's name out loud, but they still kind of work. It's mostly, and they're actually excellent speakers, right? As it turns out, they're very loud and clear and have a decent amount of bass on them, but there are people doing open source firmware for those now. Right now, it's only a jailbreak and then you can get in the terminal, but apparently the second gen ones you can get into, and then there are starting people to develop open source firmware around that. And of course, one of the things someone did was run OpenClaw on their Alexa speaker, right? Because that's what people do when they break into things. But it is something that I think is very interesting. And also, I do think that there's going to be a bit of a renaissance here, right? In regards to more projects at home. And something that didn't even make it in the rundown, and we're just going to have to talk about AI next week, but is that Claude has, or I'm sorry, ChatGPT, maybe Claude 2, at least ChatGPT. If not, they'll have feature parity in a week. But is that there's now computer access to Claude, which means that it can control your computer in the background. And one of the things that I did with that last week was that I moved my Hermes agent from one computer to another to give it more space, and one that was newer, so I trusted the hardware more. And ChatGPT did that for me. It logged into the terminal, it put in all the commands. I had to enter my password occasionally. It moved it to the new computer and did all the complicated setup there. And then it mostly worked great, right? And in fact, even tonight, ChatGPT is now available as a direct download on Linux. Weird that didn't make a rundown, but so you can download the codex slash the ChatGPT app for Ubuntu Linux and some other varieties, and you can open up a terminal and it will control the terminal for you, right? And so if you're scared of the terminal, like I kind of used to be, like tonight I downloaded an app on there that was an app image, which I don't even know how to install those. That every time I try with the command line I fail. It just installed it for me and said, there you go. And then the icon popped up and called it good. Especially if you're a maker and you're using, I feel very inspired that I could make some wild Raspberry Pi projects and create controllers for things and create autonomous robots and really pretty wild stuff. So if you're a tweaker of technology, then I think that's something that could be quite stunning to work with.
To not curtail us too fast, one of the things I've been noticing is we're recording this live on YouTube, and this is going out as a vertical video and a landscape video. But what I've been doing with our landscape video is bringing it into the script and removing the filler words. So all of our ahs and uhs and buts and all that end up getting taken out. Sometimes that's 10 minutes, Jason. So if we go over the hour, we still might on the edited version be under 60 minutes. So before we do Geeks of the Week, let's do a couple other articles. For the record, the bad calls were under our AI category. Do you want to pick up another article or two before we Geek of the Week it?
Sure, my pleasure. First and foremost, new tools released this week specifically for students. Google announced new study tools today that are integrated into Gemini, and ChatGPT releases basically ChatGPT for teens, which includes both kind of a responsible homework reminder, whatever that means, and then also kind of a homework mode to help teens overdoing the answers for them. And while I applaud ChatGPT's and efforts here to try to build in some safety is the wrong word here, but some pedagogy into this, just a reminder that it's not hard to get a free AI account, right? And from anywhere. That I'm not saying it's going to do a great job, the free accounts, but it's going to do a decent job for sure. And remember, last year's models are available in lots of different platforms this year for low or no cost. And so just something to keep in mind. But I do think that this is probably vastly overdue. It's a step in the right direction, but it doesn't solve the larger problem.
And one reason this is very significant is because schools are deciding, as always, what websites and web tools to allow students and teachers to actually use at school. And so the more that Google puts Gemini into Google search, connects things to Google Classroom, makes things part of the Google Drive, universe, and just into Google Docs and that kind of integration, the more those things are at teachers' fingertips and students' fingertips. And so it's important to recognize that those are there. And I would just say, as a current middle school classroom teacher, we really do need to talk to students with individual assignments about our AI expectations. If it's fine to use AI, I wouldn't just do a binary yes or no. And I know, Jason, you've talked in the Frontier Learning Lab. There's some really good frameworks because it's not just a red light, green light. Do you really want full AI where they can just literally, I've had students do this, copy my Canvas assignment and put it into ChatGPT and then just give me what it yields and basically do zero thinking. I don't want that. So if I'm going to allow AI use, what kind of AI use am I going to allow? And I would encourage everybody to become more nuanced than just red light, green light with their AI use.
Let's see, other quick ones.
Go ahead.
So they're going to talk about Anthropic announced last week a new feature that they're rolling out right now. I think it's all models going forward, and they're going to retrofit previous models, but they are going to watermark. I've also heard it called fingerprinting text output. And so basically, they've been very clear, and I understand why they insist on this, because otherwise this tool is ridiculous. It doesn't impact the quality of the outcome. It works as well in code that it's written as much as it is in regular prose that it writes, but it's able to be detectable as written by Claude. And I have a couple things here. I still think this seems like images I get, right? But with text, it seems like there's going to have to be a compromise of the quality to be able to do this. But more importantly, there's been a dozen articles I've seen in the last 2 weeks about how people are figuring out how to get around this, right? I can't imagine that this is that easy that hard to foil. And the thing that I like to remind people, that our cleverest of students are probably figuring out ways to slip the stuff past us anyways, but this is going to catch the kids that are doing the lowest effort of ignoring learning, right? Just like they have for generations and generations of being a stinker.
And my encouragement, again, to everyone is to try to document as fully as you can and ask students to document as fully as they can their conversations and interactions with AI, because the insight comes from that conversation. And if one of the things I do not like about Gemini for schools, and I don't know if it's just Workspace, is you can't share the conversation. So last year I was having students highlight and copy into a Google Doc their full conversation, because that is where I, as the teacher, get the insight into what kind of thinking did you do as you interacted with this chatbot and asked it to create this infographic or this paragraph or whatever it is that they created.
Yeah, totally. And I'm sure that everyone will do a play like this at some point. And I know it just feels like it's going to be pretty easy to work around.
Is it okay for me to do that synthetic content one, or are you going to skip that one?
Actually, let's post that to next week, because I think
we can also just skip it. We'll just say, hey guys, there's fake content out there. So, and it's not even
breaking news. There's fake content, and by the way, active politicians are using it.
And even when people know that it is, that doesn't stop them from seeing it and from it having an impact. I think that's one of the things that perhaps some people thought, oh, let's have people tag it AI and then it's going to minimize its impact, but that's not happening. Okay, how about the Geeks of the Week, sir? Do you have anything for me?
Why don't you go first?
Okay. Stephen Johnson, one of my absolute favorite thinkers, authors. He's created video series on PBS. How Did We Get to Now? Lots of books I've read by him. This is a video called Stephen Johnson on How AI Will Change Writing. It is by The Atlantic and it came out on August the 12th. I went ahead and asked Claude, and I will provide you with the full archive conversation to summarize the key ideas. So the key headlines are cognitive uploading versus cognitive offloading. How NotebookLM, which is now called Gemini Notebook, is designed differently than other chatbots, where Johnson draws ethical lines on writing when it comes to using AI, style convergence and AI slop, education and assessment, the future of publishing and authorship, and then just some closing advice. So he is a trusted voice for me when it comes to innovation, when it comes to writing. He's the primary consultant that Google has worked with for NotebookLM, which is absolutely one of the most wonderful and useful AI tools that I have encountered. Thank you, Jason, because you were the one who told me about that first. I also included the link to his Substack, one of the few Substacks that I actually pay money to support so that I get all of his posts, and his Substack is called The Adjacent Possible. Cannot recommend him enough. And then last week, Jason mentioned Meshtastic, which is a open source project basically to be able to text on a mesh network in your neighborhood, but it could be for miles in your community, depending upon what gets in the way of the signal and how powerful your antenna is, etc. No licensing, unlike ham radio, where you got to take a test and the FCC licenses it. And so last night, my wife's asleep. She doesn't hear this. It'll come in a week. I ordered my first Meshtastic antennas. Of course, I use Claude to help research, compare on the Meshtastic website. They have a lot of different hardware options. I went with the Allegro, which is a Shenzhen-based company. I did look into this too. Yes, it's a Chinese company. But I went with the ThinkNode M1. It has about 3 times the battery and a pretty good antenna as far as range. It also has GPS, and I'm going to be careful with this because when you are going to use Meshtastic, you have an app on your phone, you have this hardware radio basically that pairs to it with Bluetooth, and then you can go out there and text with whoever else is on the Meshtastic network. We have a local Charlotte mesh community. There's a Facebook group, there's a website, there's one in North Carolina as well. And there's another offshoot of this, and you can flash the firmware to switch over to this one that is a little bit more like cell towers, and it forwards messages, and it's not just like who's on live right now. Someone was posting in the Facebook group a couple weeks ago that we need to have ham radio folks will call it local nets, and like on Sunday night at X time, people will get on and chat. But what I'm going to be careful about is when you get online with this, it'll give your GPS coordinates to where you are. So if it's your house, you're just telling the world where you are. So I'm going to be mobile and do this from a park or whatever. But the reason I got 2, and we'll see how my wife is up for this, you can do this with somebody else, but they have to have a radio too. For about $15, I also ordered a little USB-C adapter, which will make my laptop into a node so that I can run software and then I can chat here too. So I don't think this is going to change my life dramatically, but this is actually something I was thinking about. Vibe coding was like, how could people in our neighborhood, theoretically, let's say, if the grid was down, be able to communicate with each other. And so being able to have these kind of radios opens up possibilities. Good. Our Idaho friend is saying you should be able to deactivate or fuzz the location in the app. Yeah, good. I'm just going to be careful the first time I turn it on and start to play with it. I'm not going to be at my house. But somebody, again, who was in our local Charlotte Facebook group, what is that called with Wi-Fi when you were going around trying to find free Wi-Fi? It's like war driving or something?
Yeah, it was war driving. Yeah.
Go around to find free open access points or whatever. So this guy was doing the same thing to try to find nodes, and then he published a screenshot of a map that showed all the nodes that were active within our 2.5 million person Charlotte community. So anyway, I think it's cool. It's geeky. It is absolutely a geek of the week. And yet again, I have overshared. So I apologize in advance, Jason. Not in advance. I apologize at the end. It's the end of the geek of the week apology again from Wes for oversharing.
Yeah, and I'll just share a quick one then. This is there's so many really interesting tools being developed right now, and I'm pretty sure vibe coding has a lot to do with their quicker advancement. And I think that there are good arguments for or against the general concept. But this is an alternative to Claude Code called Open Design, which I'm starting to increasingly use. And I have Claude Design Access. But part of it is that how do I take an as a simplistic infographic and add just enough a design element to it to make it clear to read, but more importantly, look nice inside of a report. And it's different than generating an image because it's using scripts and drawing it with code in essence. But I've been able to produce some really interesting things with it. And one of the things that I did have Open Design do that I've also had Claude Design work on as well is I'm now managing my CV in an Obsidian folder, and I just add things to it every couple of weeks in Markdown as I do presentations and such. And if I need a PDF copy of it, I just ask Claude Design or Open Design to create a fresh version of the PDF. And it's very clean and very beautiful. So that's Open Design.
And so you use Claude Design to do that too?
Yeah, and it works great. There's a little button in the lower left-hand side called Claude Design, and it will do documents. You get only a certain number of generations it's either week or month. But what's cool about it is that it does an excellent job to start off with, but you can start off with a markdown document and then leave with slides, or you can leave. In fact, a couple weeks ago, it made something for me that I was actually very tempted to use, but I needed something different at the time. But I was having it put together a handout based on my slides, and it offered to make me HTML slides. One of the things that I've learned in kind of this vibe coding world is there's such thing as a one-page HTML thing, right? Which is great because you can then you can stick that in a lot of different locations, right? And full games and such. But in this particular case, it created it was more on the text design side than it was on the graphic design side, but a beautiful set of slides that I would have been happy to share that were simplistic, but in a great way. Claude Design and also Open Design both do those things very well.
Yeah, don't forget you can play trail typers and practice your keyboarding skills with a single HTML file and do it head to head in the classroom live. Yeah, the power of HTML and JavaScript. Back in probably the mid 90s, Jason, I remember some kind of project, and this was like you were typing the code, but it created your presentations as HTML, and then you just had that single file and had all your slides and everything. But how wild to be able to have AI help with that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have gone a little bit over time. If you're watching the edited version, where Jason and I never say anything like it, but maybe you're just listening to this for an hour because of the script. But this has been the EdTech Situation Room. We are now apparently a weekly show because we've been 3 or 4 weeks here every week. But that is our plan to normally be here on Wednesday nights. We are at 9 p.m. Eastern, wherever that is in your locale. We have our show notes on edtechsr.com/links. Jason, where can people find you when you are not here on a Wednesday night?
Best place to find me is probably LinkedIn, but also you can go to my website, aicentrist.com.
All right. And rumor was that you're working on another website. Is that rumor still true?
That is true. And it's actually beautiful.
Awesome. I can't wait to see it. Oh, gosh, you can't get to wesfryer.com. Maybe I have been hacked. Usually you can bring up wesfryer.com. I'm in the process of moving my virtual private server sites to somewhere else, but I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on the socials. I really probably like to use actually Blue Sky and Mastodon the most now, or Spoutable, but you can find me a lot of places. This is the EdTech Situation Room. We are at edtechsr.com. As long as that site's not hacked, we're on YouTube, which is not going to be hacked. And we're on podcasts, and Substack is where we shifted to our podcast, which may turn out to be a fortuitous decision in a world of increasing AI cyber security concerns. But we hope you'll join us again. Thank you for those of you that have joined us live. Stay savvy, stay safe. We'll see you again soon on the EdTech.
And by the way, wesfryer.com is up for me.
Oh, good. It's just for me. Okay,
Yeah,
maybe my elves have already repaired the situation. So yeah.
there you go. So, peace.